Just after 2 o'clock on an August afternoon in 2019, police were called to a horse farm in Long Valley, New Jersey. The place was called Hawthorne Hill. From the road, it looked like the last place where something like this should happen. Fences, paddocks, training rings, a world built around discipline, money, and control. Then officers got there and found Lauren Kanarek shot in the chest. During the emergency call, she identified the man she said had done it. Michael Barisone. That name meant something in American dressage. He was not just another riding instructor with a barn and a local reputation. He had competed at the highest levels of the sport, served as an alternate for the 2008 Olympic team, coached elite riders, and built a life inside a corner of the horse world where precision meant everything. So the question was immediate. How does a well-known Olympic-level coach end up accused of shooting one of his own students at his own training facility? And the stranger part was this. The shooting was only the final moment. The real story had been building for months. To understand it, you have to back up to the relationship between Michael Barisone and Lauren Kanarek. Kanarek was an equestrian rider with money, ambition, and a serious interest in dressage. She met Barisone in 2018 and moved to Hawthorne Hill with her fiancé, Rob Goodwin, so she could train under him. The farm was supposed to be a place where she could improve, compete, and move deeper into an elite world that runs on expensive horses, constant coaching, and close personal relationships. That kind of setup can get intense fast. In dressage, riders and trainers are often around each other every day. They work in the same physical space. They depend on the same horses, the same routines, the same expectations. Business and personal boundaries can blur until it gets hard to tell where one stops and the other starts. At first, this looked like one more ambitious rider working with a high-level coach. Then the relationship began to crack. Barisone later said one major point of conflict involved one of his horses. He claimed Kanarek and Goodwin had taken control of the horse for showing, and that when he told them they could no longer compete with it, the pressure between them got worse. Kanarek pushed back hard on that version of events. By 2019, whatever trust had existed was clearly gone. The arguments did not stay private. Kanarek began posting videos and statements online describing what she said was harassment and intimidation at the farm. She publicly called Barisone racist, homophobic, and anti-Semitic. He denied those accusations. Barisone and his legal team would later say those public attacks were part of a long campaign that pushed him into a psychological collapse. Said the real problem was harassment, bullying, and abuse of power directed at her. That is one of the things that makes this case so difficult to pin down. Both sides said they were the ones being terrorized, and by then, they were still living on the same property. Think about that for a second. Not just a bad professional breakup, not just ugly messages online. They were in the same environment, day after day, moving through the same farm while the conflict kept getting worse. At some point, Barisone decided he wanted Kanarek and Goodwin off the property. Reports later said his attorney drafted an eviction notice. Police had already been called to Hawthorne Hill before the shooting. Jurors would eventually hear about repeated disputes and the toxic atmosphere that had taken over the place. There was even a 911 call in July 2019, about a month before the shooting, where Barisone described Kanarek and Goodwin as menaces to society. In that call, he said, "This is a war, and it's going to be dealt with right now." That line sounds chilling in hindsight. Because on August 7, 2019, the standoff turned into gunfire. What happened next was central to the criminal case. According to prosecutors, Barisone went to a safe, got a gun, loaded it, and drove down to the house on the farm where Kanarek and Goodwin were staying. Kanarek later described seeing him coming toward her and realizing something was wrong. She said he was staring at her, and then he pulled out the gun and fired. She was hit twice in the chest. Investigators also said Barisone fired at Goodwin and missed him. Goodwin tackled Barisone during the confrontation. For Kanarek, the damage was catastrophic. She survived, but only after emergency surgery. One of the bullets caused life-threatening injuries to her left lung. She was placed in a medically induced coma. But even after the shooting, the story still did not settle into anything simple. Because Barisone did not just stay there and wait for police. Suddenly, this was not only a shooting scene at a horse farm, it was also a manhunt for a well-known dressage coach who had disappeared into the surrounding area after shooting one of his students. When police found him, he had suffered a self-inflicted wound. And somewhere in that chaotic aftermath, as officers were taking him away, he reportedly said, "I had a good life." That sentence hung over the case, not as proof of motive, not as an explanation, just one more piece of a story that already felt unstable and hard to fully understand. The legal case moved forward, and prosecutors charged Barisone with 2 counts of first-degree attempted murder and 2 weapon charges. One attempted murder count related to Kanarek. The other related to Goodwin, because prosecutors said Barisone fired at him too. If this had gone the way many people expected, the trial would have been about whether he shot them. But that was not really the fight. Barisone's defense did not deny that he fired the gun. Instead, his lawyers argued that he was legally insane at the time. That changed everything. The courtroom was no longer just asking, did he do it? It was asking, what was happening inside his mind when he did it? According to the defense, the months of conflict at Hawthorne Hill had pushed Barisone into a delusional state. His lawyers said he had been mentally tortured, overwhelmed by anxiety, paranoia, and suicidal thoughts. At trial, experts called by the defense testified that he had a delusional disorder and was not accountable for his actions at the moment of the shooting. Barisone later said he had zero memory of pulling the trigger. The prosecution came at it from the opposite direction. Prosecutors argued this was intentional violence after a long and ugly conflict. They pointed to the steps Barisone took before the shooting, getting the gun from the safe, loading it, and going down to the house. To them, those actions showed planning, not a break from reality. A prosecution expert told jurors there was no basis to say Barisone had a delusional disorder and that his thinking was reality-based at the time. So the trial became a collision between 2 narratives. One side said this was attempted murder. The other said it was the act of a man whose mind had collapsed under pressure. And hanging behind both arguments was the same uncomfortable truth. Life at Hawthorne Hill had become a pressure cooker long before the shooting ever happened. After about 18 hours of deliberation, in April 2022, the jury delivered a verdict that stunned a lot of people. Michael Barisone was found not guilty by reason of insanity on the charges connected to the shooting of Lauren Kanarek and Rob Goodwin. He was also acquitted on the weapons charges. That verdict did not mean the jury thought the shooting never happened. It meant the jurors accepted that he fired the gun, but concluded that his mental state kept him from being held criminally responsible under New Jersey law. Instead of a prison sentence, Barisone was sent for psychiatric treatment and evaluation. He went first to the Anne Klein Forensic Center in Trenton, then later to Greystone Park Psychiatric Hospital, where the court process continued through hearings focused on whether he still posed a danger to himself or to the public. He was eventually released in 2023, after doctors determined he was not a threat to the community. Kanarek's life, meanwhile, had been permanently split into before and after. She survived. That matters. A lot of true crime stories end in death, and the victim becomes a memory inside a case file. This one did not end that way. Kanarek lived through the shooting, through surgery, through the coma, through the trial, and through the strange experience of hearing the man who shot her declared not guilty. By 2023, reports said she had started riding horses again. That alone says something about how complicated survival can be. And the aftermath did not stop there. In December 2025, the U.S. Equestrian Federation deemed Barisone permanently ineligible to participate in the sport due to sexual harassment and emotional misconduct. That decision put another hard boundary around a man whose identity had once been inseparable from elite dressage. So where does that leave the Spheri? Not with a neat answer. The Michael Barisone shooting case is remembered less as a clean courtroom mystery and more as the collapse of a sealed-off world. A famous coach, an ambitious student, a wealthy high-pressure sport, a farm that should have been about training and routine. And inside that world, month after month of accusations, hostility, police calls, public posts, and total distrust. Then one afternoon, all of it came to a head. That is the part that stays with people. Not only that gunshots were fired, but that the path to them was so long, so visible, and still, somehow, not stopped. From the outside, Hawthorne Hill looked controlled. Inside, it was coming apart. And by the time the rest of the country heard the name of that farm, Lauren Kanarek was fighting to stay alive, Michael Barisone was in custody, and the polished image of an elite horse world had already shattered. Even now, the case leaves behind a question bigger than the verdict. How far can a private conflict go when everybody involved believes the other side is the threat? At Hawthorne Hill, that question ended in 2 gunshots, a manhunt in the woods, and a story the equestrian world still cannot fully shake. As always, visit us at readtherealstory.com for more unbelievable true stories. Until next time, stay curious.